මම අපෝ වීඩියෝ එකේදී ඔයාලත් එක්ක එකතු වෙනවා. ඔව් ඔයාලව අද මම වීඩියෝ එකකින් ආවේ මෙන්න මේ පාර පෙන්නන්න. හරිද? මේ පාරෙත් එක ගයක් පෙන්නන්න. ඇත්තටම මේ පාර අද නම් මෙහෙම මේ ගොඩක් බිසි. ගොඩක් පළල් පාරක්. වාහන එහෙම ගොඩක් යනවා. හැබැයි අද මෙහෙම කියාට මේක 18 වෙනි සියවසේ මුල් කාලේ මැද කාලේදී නම් ගියේ අශ්ව කරත්ත විතරයි. එතකොට මේක ඔයාලා මම හැමෝම හොඳ දන්න හොඳ ප්‍රසිද්ධ පාරක්. විශේෂයෙන්ම ආතර් කනන් ඩොයිල් මහත්මයාටත් චන්දන වෙන්ඩිස් මහත්මයාටත් පින් සිද්ධ වෙන්න අපි ලන්ඩන් වල මේ පාර ගැන නම් හොඳට දන්නවා. ඇත්තටම මේක තමයි මේ බේකර් ස්ට්‍රීට් එක. සෙන්ට්‍රල් ලන්ඩන් වල තියෙන්නේ ලන්ඩන් වල මැද්දේ. එතකොට බේකර් ස්ට්‍රීට් එකේ ෂර්ලොක් හෝම්ස් නවකතාවට කතා මාලාවට පාදක වුණ ඒ ගෙදර අදටත් තියෙනවා. එතකොට ඒක ඇත්තටම ෂර්ලොක් හෝම්ස් කියලා චරිතයක් හිටියේ නැහැ. ඒ වුණාට ඒ අංකයේ දරන ගෙදර මේ වෙනකොට දැන් කෞතුකාගාරයක් කරලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒ කෞතුකාගාරය ෂර්ලොක් හෝම්ස් මේ කතා මාලාවට ගැලපෙන විදියට ප්‍රතිසංස්කරණය කරලා හදලා තියෙන මියුසියම් එකක් විදියට මම යන්නේ ඔයාලට ඒක පෙන්වන්නේ ඒ ගෙදර. මේක තමයි බේකර් ස්ට්‍රීට් එක. මේක පටු පාරක්. පාරවල් දෙකක් අතරමඟ තියෙන පාරක්. අපි බලමු යද්දි කොහොමද කියලා. මේක තමයි ඒ ගෙදර. නම්බර 221 B. අපි බලමු ඇතුළට ගිහිල්ලා.
Can I take it for all of you?
No problem.
Thank you. Have a nice night. What's your name? Excuse me.
Look.
Thank you, love.
Okay. Hello, welcome.
Hi. From there, I can take the
Tickets at the back of the shop, please.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay,
thank you. Just out to the right there.
Ya tomo replica.
මම දැන් ටිකට් පොලිමේ ඉන්නේ. ඇත්තට මෙහාට එන්න කලින් ඔන්ලයින් ටිකට් එක බයි කරන්න පුළුවන්, පර්චේස් කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙබ්සයිට් එකට ගිහින්. ඒක සාමාන්‍යයෙන් පවුන්ඩ් 16ක් වගේ තමයි ටිකට් එක වෙන්නේ. නැත්තම් මෙතන කවුන්ටර් එකෙන් ගන්න පුළුවන්. හැමදාම හවස 6 වෙනකන් මේක ඕපන්. ඒතකොට 5:20ට කලින් එනවනම් ඉන්න ඕනේ බලන්න.
Detalhe. 16 adultos, 11 crianças.
මෙතන ඇත්තටම මේ ෂෙර්ලොක් හෝම්ස් එක සම්බන්ධ අනුකරණ බඩු තියෙනවා. අපිට ඕන නම් සිහිවටනයක් විදිහට සල්ලි වල ගන්න පුළුවන්. මේ තියෙන මේ ෂොප් එක යට තට්ටු.
Sai da fila.
one ticket.
One ticket. Other one. 16, please. Need to go outside. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, please. Anybody waiting? 2 adults, 1 student.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How can go to the inside?
Let's see your ticket there. Sorry, the other side just. Okay, so if you join into the general admissions queue, we'll get you in as soon as possible, basically. Okay,
This queue, right.
just the queue there. Sorry about that. Okay,
Okay,
shouldn't be
thank
too
you.
long.
No, la pena no. ¿Qué quieres que lo diga? Si tú suparo.
අපිට පොලිමේ ඉන්න වෙනවා. ටිකෙන් ටික තමයි කට්ටිය වෙබ්බට යවන්නේ. අපි මෙච්චරලා අප හිටියේ පල්ලෙහා මේ සුවිනියර්ස් ගන්න පුළුවන් ෂොප් එකේ. දැන් උඩටට්ටුව තමයි බේකර් ස්ට්‍රීට් එකේ ෂෙල්ලොක් හෝම්ස් ට ගෙදර කියලා විදිහට හදලා තියෙන්නේ. අපි බලමු උඩට ගිහින්. අපි යන්න හදන්නේ ඇතුළට.
Elena. Gracias, diga. Gracias.
Perfect.
Thank you. මේක තමයි අර ප්‍රසිද්ධ තරක්කු පෙළ. මේකේ නගින සද්දෙන් තමයි ෂෙල්ලොක් හෝම්ස් කියන්නේ. එයාගේ හුඟක් කෙනෙක් කෙනාගේ ගතිගුණ ගැන.
Good evening, everyone. If you could all make your way into there, I'll begin the tour in just a moment. If taller people want to go at the back and shorter people to the front so everyone can see. Good evening, everyone. Is anyone else coming up behind you there? Fantastic. If you guys could keep moving in, please. Again, if you guys want to go on that little bit there. Alrighty. Good evening, everyone. How are we all doing? Good? Good. Glad to hear it. So welcome to 221B Baker Street, home of course to the world's greatest detective and his dear friend Dr. Watson. Now before I begin, I have a few boring rules that I need to cover first. We firstly ask that you don't record any videos throughout the museum. However, photography is absolutely fine, including any photos of myself. Secondly, a lot of the items that you see around you are about 150 years old, so please ask that you refrain from touching them. So with all of that out of the way, I will begin. So if you were to come here with a case for Mr. Holmes in the 1880s or 1890s, you'd first be welcomed downstairs at the front door by none other than the dreaded Mrs. Hudson. You would then be escorted by her up those 17 steps in which you just walked up, and you would be asked by Mr. Holmes to sit in this very chair here and tell him all about your case. Now Mr. Holmes would be sat over here opposite you, shrouded in shadow, whilst you would be illuminated in natural light coming from that window and that window over there. Now Holmes chose to sit you in this very spot as he wanted this natural light to fully illuminate your face, so he could clearly read and analyse your facial features to see if you were telling him any lies about your case. Now if, and I say that with a very big if, your case sounded interesting enough for him to pursue, he would agree to take it on and would indeed begin investigating it. Now, throughout many of these investigations, Mr. Holmes used quite a bit of equipment, some of which we have over here. Now this is his famous chemistry set. Now Holmes was a pioneer in chemistry for the time, so much so that he was using fingerprint analysis a whole 10 years before Scotland Yard were. And to commemorate this today, Scotland Yard now have a method of analysis simply titled Holmes. In front of the desk there, we have his famous violin. Now he would often play this instrument to ease his rather busy, hectic mind, or when he was just bored. Now he would get bored very often and quite easily, so much so that one day he got so bored in fact that he sat down in this chair here, with a loaded pistol in his hand, and he shot into the back wall there the letters VR. Now that stands for Victoria Regina, which is a Latin translation of someone's name. Does anyone want to take a shot at whose name it could be? Any famous Victorias from the period?
No.
So it's Latin for Queen Victoria. Now Holmes did this as he was quite the royalist and had quite the fondness for Queen Victoria. So around the house you may see quite a few bits of Queen Victoria memorabilia, like this bust of her on the mantelpiece. Now left of the bust we have a photo of a very glamorous woman, who is often referred to by Mr. Holmes quite simply as the woman. Does anyone know the name of this character? No. So this is Irene Adler, the famous opera singer and the one person to have outsmarted Mr. Holmes. Now over here we have a much tidier desk which belongs to Dr. Watson, and on top of it there we have a newspaper which is from the year 1881. But why this year, I hear you ask? Well, it is of course the year that Holmes and Watson first met and took up residence in this house here. Finally, if you get a chance, have a look in this rather old bag here in front of the desk. In it is quite a few gruesome bits of surgical equipment which would have been used by Dr. Watson. I'd be quite concerned if doctors today were still using items such as these, but alas, it's what they had to work with during the time. Now, when you're ready, if you go through that doorway there into this room here, I will continue the tour in there. Everyone wants to keep coming in still. There's a bit of space down here. Alrighty, yeah, if everyone wants to come in, there's a little bit of space here. I don't bite, I promise. Everyone can see. Fantastic. Alrighty, so welcome to Sherlock's bedroom. There's many rather interesting and quite strange items in here. The first, which I'd like to draw your attention to, is the famous deerstalker hat in this very box here. Now I'm going to break a few hearts here, so prepare yourselves. The hat is never actually mentioned in a single one of the books. No, in fact, it was a late edition made by the book's illustrator, Sidney Paget, who often drew Holmes wearing this type of hat. Now, in reality, the deerstalker hat during the Victorian time period would have been a countryside hat. It would have really only have been worn on hunting trips or, of course, visits to the country. And Holmes, well, he, of course, was a man of the city, so he would have worn a more traditional top hat, like the one you see on top of the cupboard there. Although, if you really want to get technical about it, I quite often like to say that the one case he could have worn the deerstalker hat on is, of course, the Hound of the Baskervilles, as that takes place entirely in the countryside. Now over here we have, in my opinion, a quite ghastly looking Persian slipper. Does anyone know what Mr. Holmes used to use this for? It's quite obscure, so don't worry if not. He used to stuff his tobacco into the very tip of the shoe there, as apparently it dried it out much faster and added a very certain flavour to it. What flavour, I don't want to imagine. I'm sure it was quite disgusting. Now, if everyone wants to turn around and have a look at this back wall here. Now, I imagine a lot of you, in your homes, you have up photos of friends and family on your walls. But Holmes, well, he was a bit different. No, he instead insisted on having photographs of serial killers on his wall. That's right, everyone photographed on this wall here is either a serial killer or prominent criminal from the Victorian time period. Now Holmes did this as he was fascinated about the criminal mind. Every time he saw this wall, it inspired him to learn more about it, to finally crack why criminals do what they do. Now I'm going to be talking about the rather ominous gentleman in the middle there, with the large top hat, moustache and number 2 in the corner. Now that is none other than Dr. Thomas Neil Cream, or as he's better known in London, the Lambeth Poisoner. Now he would go around London injecting people with a substance that would lead them to die very slow, rather painful deaths. He was originally arrested in Chicago, Illinois, but was released for good behaviour. A very, very poor decision on their part because, of course, immediately after he was released, he came straight back to London and continued on his killing spree. Well, that was until one night, when he went down to the pub and had a bit too much to drink. Drunkenly, he began boasting of his killings to another gentleman who was sat opposite him. But little did Dr. Cream know that this other gentleman was in fact a off-duty police officer. Dr. Cream was of course arrested the very next day and sentenced to hang. And on the date of his execution, as the noose was tightened slowly around his neck, he shouted out the now infamous last words, "I am Jack!" Does anyone know who this may be referring to? Yes, very good. I had someone say Jack Sparrow last week, which was a new one. But no, alas, it is not Jack Sparrow. It was indeed referring to Jack the Ripper. So this was during the Autumn of Terror, when Jack the Ripper was indeed at large. And for 2 weeks, the people of London rejoiced. They thought Jack the Ripper was no more. But what's the most famous thing about Jack the Ripper? He was never caught. And that is because it was later discovered that Dr. Cream up there was not even in the country when any of the Ripper killings took place, making it impossible for him to be Jack, and making it clear to everyone that not only was he a serial killer, but also a terrible, terrible liar. So why do we talk about this wall here? Well, many of Arthur Conan Doyle's characters from the books are indeed inspired by real-life killers of the time, like Jack the Ripper and of course Dr. Cream up there. So I think it's quite fascinating to talk about them and see what inspired the characters from the books that we now know and love today. So on that note, thank you all for listening. When you're ready, if you head upstairs, you'll find Dr. Watson's room and Mrs. Hudson's room, and on the 3rd floor, a waxwork museum depicting some of the most famous scenes from the books. Thank you for listening and enjoy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sherlock Holmes ඉඳාගත්තු කාමරේ. තර මේ තියෙන්නේ විසිත්ත කාමරේ. මේක තමයි අමුත් ඇවිල්ලා පිළිගන්නේ. මේක තමයි නිදාගන්න කාමරේ. අපි දැන් උඩට යමු. උඩ තට්ටුවේ තමයි වොට්සන්ගේ කාමරේ, හඩ්සන් මහත්මියගේ කාමරේ තියෙන්නේ.
Sí, 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 sí.
Ah, vos querés.
Ah, la catedral. ¿Cómo mierda hiciste? Ah, no, a mí me bajó la presión y tuve que ir.
You're not allowed to video something from here.
Deixa aqui em cima. Certo. Tirar uma aqui assim. Primeiro. Sim.
Is it okay or what?
ඔයාලා මාත් එක්කම Sherlock Holmes Museum එක ඇතුළට යන්න ඇති කියලා මම හිතනවා. මට පුළුවන් උපරිමයෙන් මම හොඳට වීඩියෝ කරන්න බැලුවා. මොකද ඇතුලේ ලයිට්නින් එහෙම පොඩ්ඩක් මදි. ඒතකොට වීඩියෝ එකේ ඔයාලට සමහර තැන් පේනවත් දන්නේ නැහැ. වැදගත්ම දේ තමයි ඇතුලේ වීඩියෝ කරන්න තහනම්. වීඩියෝ කරලා අහුනොත් ඉන්න එහෙම වෙනම ෆයින් එකක් ගහනවා. මම හොරෙන් වීඩියෝ කරේ ඔයාලට වීඩියෝ කරගෙන ඉන්න ඕනේ හින්දා. ඉතින් කොහොම හරි යන්තම් වීඩියෝ එක සම්පූර්ණ වීඩියෝ එකක් කරගත්තා. මොකද තාපහුව ඊළඟ වීඩියෝ එකනොත් හම්බ වෙමු. මගේ channel එක අනිවාර්යෙන් subscribe කරලා තියන්න. එහෙම වුණොත් මගේ වීඩියෝ එකක් අප්ලෝඩ් කරපු ගමන් ඔයාලට බලන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙනම් ඊළඟ වීඩියෝ එකෙන් හම්බ වෙනකන් ඔයාලා හැමෝටම ජය වේවා. bye.